A voice calling a man's own name back at him. A knock that shook a mountain slope. 9 nights, 9 encounters nobody can explain, and it's all caught on camera. A man sitting alone on his own property thought he was just checking on some strange noises. What he never expected was to end up staring at a head and an arm peeking out from behind a tree. The man had been hearing suspicious sounds and dealing with unusual activity near his tree stand for a while, enough that he finally decided to come down and film from the ground instead. Not long into recording, he got the strong feeling he was being watched.
I'm out here, my back against the wall, really. I've been hearing some crazy stuff out here, so I said, hell with it, come out here and record. You know, guys, I encourage anybody that has any of these encounters, or you know they're around your house, record them. Make a video, guys, because, you know, you never know. These things are smarter too. They're real smart, like real smart. So I'm on the ground, I'm by my tree stand.
Scanning the area, he caught this. Even though he did not realize at that time, there was movement behind a tree. And when later he moved the camera in that direction again, he saw it. Spooked, he moved to higher ground to get a better look. But the moment he did, the figure was gone. He'd later say the behavior he was seeing felt more aggressive than anything he'd dealt with before out there. Still scanning, he thought he spotted something again. Either the same figure or a second one entirely, this time near a different tree. Later, the footage was uploaded on NVTV, and as it continued, the man climbed down from the stand and moved parallel to where he'd last seen movement. As he worked through a theory that these creatures might have some ability to cloak or disappear from sight entirely, something that only made the situation feel more unsettling the longer he stayed out there. Despite doing everything he could to close the distance quietly, he lost track of it completely.
There's something. Whoa, guys, right there, guys. What? And it moved. Should I approach it? Holy! I knew it, guys. I knew this because I had this gut feeling, man, that I was being watched when I come out earlier. And this is a hot spot right here, guys.
On his way back, he came across an old tombstone sitting on the property, and by then, the woods around him had gone completely silent. That's when he decided to wrap the video by telling viewers to stay careful, promising to post again if anything else showed up. What was supposed to be a routine build turned into something this YouTuber still couldn't fully explain. He arrived at his woodland to find the cabin he'd spent weeks building completely destroyed. The frame ripped up and flipped onto its end, facing the opposite direction from how he'd built it. He'd broken down 50 to 60 pallets by hand to build it, and now it was in pieces on the ground. He was convinced it was vandalism, since it had happened directly in front of his trail cameras with no one else around.
Don't know what is going on here. This woodland just gets stranger and stranger, but the gutting thing is I was hoping to show you lot that cabin built from start to finish. It was just going to be a little cabin. Might as well show you it now. It's wrecked.
Determined to find out who or what did this, he pulled all 6 of his trail cameras from the woodland and spent hours that night sifting through hundreds of clips, mostly birds, rabbits, and deer. But on the last camera, something stopped him cold, and he checked it again the next day just to be sure exhaustion hadn't been playing tricks on him.
Doing a bit of wildlife photography, but whoever it is shouldn't be there. They haven't got permission to be there. It's only me.
The footage showed a figure at night on camera 6, stepping out of the woodland before the camera seemed to re-trigger and catch it coming back out again. A week later, a similar figure showed up in daylight on a different camera, this time looking more like a person, possibly dressed in camouflage with a beard, though he couldn't say for certain who it was or how they were getting onto land that was supposed to be completely secure.
It's definitely, again, if it's not the same person, it is a person. They're dressed up in some sort of camouflage or poncho. I mean, it looks like they've got a big beard. I think it's a man, to be honest with you.
This footage came from the YouTube channel Welcome to The Woods UK, where the creator regularly documented solo builds and overnight stays deep in this same stretch of English woodland. Adding to the unease, he mentioned a strange huffing noise he had picked up on camera a couple months earlier, something he had originally written off as a deer, but now wasn't so sure about given everything else that had happened. That evening, he decided to head back out to the wrecked cabin site before dark to see if anyone suspicious was hanging around.
It's got darker a lot quicker than what I thought it would, and it's drawn in, pitch black, inky black.
Walking in, the light had dropped fast, and it was pitch black by the time he reached the site. That's when he heard it. A sound like wood splitting, like someone chopping with an axe, close enough to unsettle him immediately. He couldn't explain it and decided not to stick around after dark, heading back to his van for the night.
I was proper agitated that someone's done this to that. I don't know if you can hear it. I didn't see anything, but I could hear like wood splitting, like as in like someone chopping wood, like with an axe or something.
Days later, the splitting sound came back, twice more on camera and 3 times after he shut it off, rattling him enough to cut the night short and head home. After a break to reset, he returned for a full night alone, rigging a homemade tripwire alarm around his camp to warn him if anything got close. Hours later, he woke to around 8 unexplained noises, something walking just 40 yards from his tent. The alarm never went off, but the banging kept coming, and he was left with no answer for what had torn his cabin apart or what had been circling his camp that night. What looked like a shallow little dip in the ground turned out to hide a lot more than anyone expected. A Bigfoot investigator crawled inside to check it out, and the deeper they looked, the creepier it got. The clip started simple. The investigator confirmed they were recording and got ready to crawl straight into the thing to check it out from the inside and switched on an infrared camera to start looking around.
Here we go.
Oh, it doesn't go back that far. Or does it?
At first, it didn't seem like much. The space didn't look like it went back very far at all, just a shallow pocket built against whatever was around it. This footage came from Animal Planet's long-running Finding Bigfoot series, where the team spent years chasing down exactly these kinds of structures across the country. But this one turned out to be far stranger than most. Sticks were propped up deliberately along the sides, not scattered the way debris would naturally fall, but set up with clear intent.
And there are sticks in here that have been propped up on the sides.
Switching over to night shot mode for a clearer look, the investigator realized something that changed the whole read on it. The space actually extended much further back than they'd originally thought. What looked like a small, shallow dip from the outside was actually hiding a lot more room than anyone expected.
So, no, wait a minute. This thing does go back further.
No creature ever showed up on camera in this one, just the structure itself and someone's read on what it might mean. But if something really was out there, building and adding onto a space like that, what do you think it was actually building it for? The team knew what they were getting into when they decided to explore a remote 9-acre property in the Pennsylvania wilds. Knocks, strange sounds, maybe some footprints at best, but what they saw wasn't on that list. 2 glowing eyes and more awaited them. It was the 3rd episode of Investigation Bigfoot on Small Town Monsters, and the team, Sean Forker, Gwendolyn Purcell, Matt Arner, and Aaron Dees, were determined to walk away with something concrete this time. That's why they chose a cabin deep in the Allegheny National Forest, a spot locals had pointed to as the area with the most consistent activity ever recorded. So they began.
So Sean, your mic, tell me what just happened.
Well, we were sitting at the campfire, just doing having a really good discussion, and all of a sudden, for no reason, a whole mess of dogs or coyotes or something just started going crazy over here. And then as we got up to make our way over, all the noise in that general vicinity just stopped.
By nightfall, the team had split into smaller groups. They meant to spread out across the property and see if anyone can get anything concrete, and they did actually get some.
Complete with dog barks. I love it.
And anyone could tell the sound that was behind the dog barks was something eerie. And as the hours passed, what started as routine data collection turned into something else entirely. Around 30 minutes in, they started hearing movement in the surrounding trees, and while they were trying to get a hold of the voices, their flashlights caught it.
We did not hear it leave, but we did lose sight of it. What it appeared to me was something watching, realizing it was being observed, kind of, oh, shoot, what do I do now? And then making its way out of sight quietly. That's what I perceived. But we'll go back over the footage, we'll all talk, we'll hear from you guys next. I'll stop talking now because I think my whole life might have just changed. Yes.
It was clearly a bipedal figure, distinct eye shine locking back at them. It wasn't afraid, neither did it flicker or move back. It stayed there, staring back at them. They captured it more than once that night, the same figure crouching low, then rising back to full height. What struck them most wasn't the sighting itself, it was how it moved. There was new panic, no bolt to cover the way a deer or bear would react. It seemed to realize it was being watched and simply slipped away after taking a good look at them.
Again. It's just, oh my God. Oh.
By Sunday morning, the team shifted into full debunking mode, pulling their static recorders and returning to the exact spot where they'd seen the figure. They placed team members at that same position to measure height against the tree line. The math wasn't close. Whatever they'd watched the night before stood roughly 8 feet tall at eye level, ruling out anything as common as a bear or raccoon.
I mean, what are we looking at, 20 feet here, maybe?
You're talking about probably an 8-foot individual.
Could have been that tall.
I don't know.
Because crouched, it is where your eyes are. So
At the
standing
low.
up.
Later, as they sat down with Dave and Carrie, longtime researchers who'd worked this same stretch of Pennsylvania for years, the two shared their own history, a double witness sighting one New Year's Eve, objects thrown at researchers from somewhere in the dark, and freshwater mussel shells found stacked at the base of certain trees, evidence, they believed, of something feeding nearby. Sean added a story of his own, a night inside his tent when he and others felt something physically touch them, followed by the entire sky lighting up without warning.
So we're sitting out here that night, nothing's really going on, and then all of a sudden, out of the peripheral of my right eye, and sitting kind of right there, I see something tear from this area and run across the campsite into the woods over there. Now keep in mind, this area is different now, but there were more trees over on this side, and the brush along the side was a lot heavier and thicker.
The team knows footage alone won't be enough to convince anyone outside the community. But for them, it was never really about proof for the world. It was about pattern, about trusting what their own senses picked up over years in these woods. And this was one more piece that lined up with everything that came before it. What do you think was standing there, watching them, before it just walked away? A footprint pressed fresh into the mud told Russell more than any thermal reading ever could. But it took a whole day of tracking through blood, bones, and rain to get there. He started the pursuit in heavy rain, reasoning the weather would keep most wildlife hunkered down and hopefully keep his target from moving too far. And not long into the search, he came across what he called a zone, a wide scatter of large bones, including a full pelvis, spread across the ground. What struck him was the condition of the A bear or scavenger typically leaves bones gnawed down and fractured, but these were clean, no bite marks anywhere on them, the flesh looking like it had been pulled apart with raw strength rather than chewed off. The bones were bleached from the sun, but with tendon and flesh still clinging to some of them, meaning whatever happened here hadn't happened that long ago.
A lot of times animals will feed on an animal and most of the carcass is there, but some of these large bones covered a pretty big area of ground, 20, 30 feet away from the original main part of the body. What that tells me is that something big pulled this thing apart. The thing is, what I'm looking for right now is any like bite marks where something would have chewed on the bone itself. There's not like bite marks like a bear would chew on it. And
Pushing deeper into the area, Russell came across an old homestead dating back to the early 1900s. He stepped inside looking for shelter and any sign of recent activity, and found something far worse instead. It was a trail of blood droplets scattered across the floor, and then the nails jutting down from the ceiling gave him a working theory that something had come through, caught itself on the exposed metal, and bolted out in a hurry. He followed the blood trail to confirm the direction it left in, then carefully collected samples for DNA testing, hoping to prove it belonged to something other than a known species.
so I've got a pretty good blood sample right here. I'm going to take this sample. That's perfect. We're going to grab 2 DNA samples out of this. Could have been a person. It could have been an animal. But if there's more to this than a human or a known animal species, then we've got a great starting point. We actually have DNA in a blood sample. All right.
By nightfall, Russell was roughly 10 miles from where he'd started and 4 miles out from his original thermal sighting. That's when he started picking up sound, something moving steadily through water nearby. He dropped his heavy pack to move quieter and switched to night vision goggles, working his way across steep, unstable terrain with the growing feeling that something was watching him the entire time.
Sounds like something walking through water. I want to get closer. I think we need to go stealth. I want to be able to move quietly and keep that element of surprise. So I'm going to ditch the big backpack and break out the night vision goggles. If there's anything out here, at least it's not going to see me coming.
His infrared gear failed to catch any reflective eyeshine, so he switched to a flashlight instead. Whatever had been tracking him seemed to have already moved off, but he kept pushing forward anyway. That's when he found it. A massive, fresh footprint pressed into the soil. He crouched down and counted the toe impressions. 1, 2, 3, distinct and unmistakable, along with a size that stopped him cold.
Wildlife, the IR, would actually show their reflective eyes coming back. I've got none of that. I'm going to take these off and use the light. I know something came through here, but it's gone. We're almost a mile away. Let's work our way back. Now we've got a long night ahead of us, so I've decided I'm going to go back and continue the same direction I've been tracking. Look at that. Look at that. Holy crap, look at this. Look how big that thing is. That looks fresh. Look at the size of that thing.
Do you see any more?
Look at it. Watch where you step. Holy dude. Tell me what you think that looks like.
He ruled out a bear almost immediately. A bear print would carry a defined pad and claw marks, and there wasn't a trace of either here. By the end of the night, Russell had gone from circumstantial pieces, stripped bones, a blood trail, an unexplained sound in the dark, to something he could actually hold evidence for. He didn't say much, standing over that print. He didn't really need to.
1, 2, 3. That looks like toes. Oh my God. That looks like toes, man. Let me heel.
Could it be a bear?
No. A bear would have a distinctive pad, and in front of that, the claws would have laid down and pushed into that soil. There's nothing.
They heard about a place known for Bigfoot, loud, mysterious sounds heard all night by locals, and figured they'd catch something on camera. But as the night wore on, they started losing hope. Then this happened.
Someone want to do it? Shut the up! Nuh-uh, dude, no way!
Grab the camera! Grab the camera!
No way, dude, nuh-uh. Nuh-uh, dude. That's not real. What the f?
Ryan Reese and River Reese, aka Twin Paranormal, first learned about a stretch of wilderness near the Columbia River Gorge in Washington state back in October 2025. The more they researched, the more it stood out. Vast, isolated terrain with a reputation as one of the region's biggest Sasquatch hotspots.
Between the endless pine forests, fog-covered mountains, and deep river valleys, there are millions of acres of untouched wilderness. I mean, people have literally not been here for hundreds of years, and that is the perfect place where something or someone could hide. It's quiet, isolated, and wild enough that you can literally walk for hours or days without seeing another human being, which is perfect for something that does not want to be found.
They didn't wait. The very next night, they headed out with two strategies in mind: high elevation vantage points in the hills and areas near running water, both places researchers say the creature tends to favor.
And the second spot would be down towards some sort of running water, so a creek, a river, and that is way down the hill that we are going to hit probably for the second part of tonight. This general area would be a good spot to try and stake out for a Bigfoot, if they actually exist.
With clear objectives set, they got to work laying out audio recorders, megaphones, everything ready to go. But nothing they'd planned for prepared them for what came next. The moment they entered the woods, they stumbled onto a mysterious hut built from stacked logs.
What? Is that a witch hut?
What do you mean?
Do you see that? Do you guys see that?
Oh, there's a building right there. What the? Oh, dude, that's a straight man-made hut.
Go around.
What the? Dude, shut up.
At first, they figured hunters built it, but the deeper they looked, the less sure they were, especially given how dense and remote the area was. A structure like that shouldn't have been out here at all. That uncertainty was exactly why they decided to try their Bigfoot calls right there. If something built that hut, it might still be close. So they started calling out, voices and megaphone both, hoping for a response. Almost immediately, the atmosphere shifted. Then, they heard this.
Ooh. Uh-oh. Did you hear that? Yeah. We gotta get going.
Roll that one.
Got it?
Yeah, that was.
That's literally what we're looking for.
That is? No. Dude, that's terrifying.
We just started filming because we heard a very, very loud knock. Apparently to what, that's exactly what we're looking for. That's already terrifying.
It wasn't the exact call they were hoping for, but it was enough. Something, or someone, was tracking them, staying just close enough to be heard. They kept moving anyway, and the sounds only got clearer.
The sound. Do you hear that? That is something 100% moving through the leaves. Do you notice how it's when we talk out loud?
Yeah. Guys, talking.
Sound wasn't the only thing following them. There was a smell too, thick enough that it left no doubt they weren't alone out there.
As I was walking, I smelled like a rotten smell.
Yep.
No way.
I don't know if it's like a dead animal, like maybe like just like a small animal that's dead off to the side, but
I'm dead. That's the smell.
Between the weather and the growing sense of being watched, the team finally decided to head back to the vehicle, but not before one last attempt. That's when it happened.
I'm trying, I can't see anything.
That's straight. I saw that, dude. That straight up looked like a shadow. It was just black.
No way. Nuh-uh, dude.
shh, shh.
A shadow moved through the trees, deep enough in the woods that no person had any business being there. While they debated what else it could have been, they heard it again.
Someone want to do it? Shut the up! Nuh-uh, dude, no way!
Grab the camera! Grab the camera!
No way, dude, nuh-uh. Nuh-uh, dude. That's not real. What the fuck? No, nuh-uh, dude, no. Did I hear that right? Was that a double back?
Come on.
Was that a double back?
Please.
Seriously.
That was enough. They pulled back to a safer spot and waited out the rest of the night, counting down until they could leave at first light. They never got hard proof of what was out there with them, but between the sounds, the smell, and what they saw in those last minutes, they still call it one of the most brutal nights of their lives. They came out to explore a set of abandoned cabins, cold and half-joking about broken flashlights. What ended there was something neither of them could explain, close enough to send them sprinting back to the car. Dustin Frazier and his companion arrived at Elkmont on a freezing night, immediately dealing with equipment trouble as their flashlights started flickering on and off before they'd even stepped inside the first cabin. They laughed it off at first, blaming the cold, and headed in anyway.
Okay, hello guys. So, we are here at Elkmont. So, it's cold, but we decided to come up here. We haven't been in... Why is the light going off? We are going in the first house. Oh, Justin's here. I'm shivering. He's cold. So,
walking through the first structure, they took note of the restoration work being done on the property, pointing out which boards were original and which ones had been stained and screwed in over the old wood during renovations. It was while examining one of these walls that the mood shifted slightly. One of them jokingly mentioned there could have been a live bear on the other side of it, a thought neither of them had considered before walking in. Seconds later, one of them jumped hard, startled after mistaking their own reflection or shadow for the other person standing behind them.
ooh, something about that.
There could be a live bear on the other side of it, yeah. There is something about that.
Yeah, I didn't take into account about like wildlife and stuff. Jesus!
Sorry, Queen.
I thought you were behind me. I thought you were over here.
You don't see my light.
I don't know. I have two lights pointed at my face right now.
By the time they moved into the second cabin, the flashlight issues had gotten worse, cutting out repeatedly no matter how much they shook or adjusted them. Inside, they found an old bathroom and what looked like a toilet, along with a hot water heater still sitting in the back of the structure, oddly intact for a place that had been abandoned for years. One of them raised a question that stuck with both of them, wondering out loud what exactly all this fencing and structure work around the property was meant to keep out. They half joked, half seriously, that it was probably just black bears.
Toilet.
It's not a toilet.
They don't be toilet like that. Did you see me?
Oh, lights out again.
Chad, is this where people poo?
There's a hot water heater back there.
But in this house.
Also, my question is, what are they trying to keep out? You're like bears. Bears.
Fucking black bears, yeah. The North American black bears. They're nosy little fuckers.
This clip was later uploaded on the channel Dustin Frazier, where footage like this, exploring forgotten, abandoned locations most people wouldn't dare enter after dark, was a regular part of Dustin's content. Heading into the third cabin, the tone of the video noticeably changed. One of them commented on how spooky the place felt compared to the first two, and it was here that Dustin realized his flashlight issue all along had simply been dead batteries. There was nothing scary about it, just bad luck with the gear. For a moment, things felt almost normal again as they walked through, commenting on the architecture of the space.
Okay, so we're walking into cabin number 3, and as you can see, she's fucking spooky. Also, I found out why my flashlight wasn't working. I needed new batteries. So, I haven't used it that much though. Ooh. No pets allowed. I can't come in. I'm a Look at the architecture.
That's the point when everything changed. A sound ripped through the cabin that neither of them could identify or explain. There was no delay in their reaction. Immediately, one of them asked if they needed to leave, and within seconds, calm turned into full panic.
Don't run, just...
What followed wasn't a slow retreat. It was an outright sprint. Voices cracked as they yelled back and forth, trying to figure out where the other one was in the dark, both of them clearly terrified and repeating the same question over and over, unsure what exactly they had just heard. At one point, they even lost track of each other entirely in the chaos, calling out into the dark before finding their way back together and continuing to run. Neither of them managed to get a visual on whatever made the sound. There was no track left behind, no measurement, nothing physical to point to. All that was left was the sound itself, and two people running full speed away from a cabin they'd walked into calmly just minutes earlier. If you had been standing in that cabin and heard something you couldn't explain, would you have stayed to figure out what it was, or run like they did? They'd already lost the creature once that day, and their plan to draw it back out was risky at best. But minutes after trying something they hadn't planned on, the forest answered back. After failing to relocate the figure they'd spotted earlier near a water source, investigators Mireya Meyer and Biko Croy moved to higher ground in a wooded section of the valley, hoping the elevation would give them a better read on whatever was still out there.
Hey, let's get to the top of this hill. You have that game call, right?
I do.
Well, if something's hiding out in these woods, it's probably not going to come out as long as it knows we're here. But if we can deceive it into thinking we're another Bigfoot entering its area, then maybe it'll call back and give...
Mireya set up first, using a loudspeaker to play a recorded Bigfoot vocalization, betting that a nearby creature might mistake it for another one moving into its territory. With thermal cameras up and ready, the team waited through several attempts, but nothing came back. Biko, who was used to relying on mouth calls rather than electronics, decided it was worth trying by himself. He let out a loud manual howl that carried clean across the valley, hoping it sounded more convincing than anything coming through a speaker. This particular episode was part of Expedition Bigfoot, uploaded by the YouTube channel What Not, and it was this exact moment where the investigation took a turn nobody on the team expected. Almost right after Biko's call faded out, something answered. A clear, distinct vocalization came back from somewhere across the valley, and both investigators immediately ruled out anything ordinary, like a mountain lion. The excitement in their voices was obvious, as they debated whether whatever was out there had somehow picked up on the difference between a recording and an actual live call. By the end of the clip, they'd made up their minds, and they started moving toward the direction the sound had come from to keep the investigation going.
That didn't sound like a mountain lion. Or...
No, did not. Wow, that's exciting.
We got no response from the recorded call, but when I called, we heard something back. I don't know if that's because my voice just carried further, or if whatever we're dealing with could tell the difference between a recorded call and live vocal cords.
If something out there could tell the difference between a recording and a real call, what did that tell you about what they were actually dealing with? He hiked for hours just to find real solitude, the kind you only got miles off any trail. He had no idea that the story he was about to share on camera would end with something watching him from the same direction he'd just walked. Darren spent the first stretch of the video making his way through a thick patch of Douglas fir, hiking for hours in the heat until he reached a river he clearly knew well. Once he arrived, he paused to catch his breath and take in the view, weighing whether the water was cold enough for a swim before pushing on. This clip comes from the YouTube channel Outlaw Country by Darren, a guy who had built a following by vanishing into terrain most hikers never came close to reaching. And the day he filmed the video, Darren settled into the real reason he was out there, going through some of the encounter stories sent in by people who followed his channel. The first one came from a fishing guide named Scott, who said that back in 1996, while working a remote stretch of river in British Columbia, he watched two Bigfoot creatures fishing for salmon together like they'd done it 100 times before.
Now, Scott's not a hunter, he's just a fisherman, he doesn't hunt, but he says he's heard elk before, and it kind of sounded like a little bit like an elk, but also like a person. And so he's sitting down on the beach, and he looks up, and he sees this Bigfoot come walking out of the trees, and it just sticks its head out of the trees, and it looks up the river, and down the river, and then back up the river, and Scott's down the river.
It was while he was deep into this story, alone in that place where almost nobody hiked through, that his camera caught something behind him. Movement on the ridge above cut through his sentence mid-thought, and he turned toward the hillside almost on instinct, like something had told him to look. For a few seconds, several figures showed up along the high ground behind him, then disappeared just as fast. Darren didn't try to convince anyone it was more than it might have been. He said openly they could have been other hikers who had somehow made it that deep off trail, but what stuck with him was the timing. He'd hiked for hours to be completely alone, was mid-story about a stranger's encounter, and right then, something appeared on the ridge behind him and pulled his attention like it wanted to be seen. Nobody who had gone back through that section of the Smokies since had ever explained who or what had been standing on that ridge that day. Would you have turned to look or kept your eyes forward and walked faster? This encounter didn't happen in North America at all, and it wasn't caught by someone chasing legends. It happened to a wildlife biologist working alone in a South African national park, and it was remembered less for what was seen than for what was heard. The researcher had come into the valley on a completely routine task, scouting locations to set up a camera trap along a game trail. On camera, he talked through his thinking in the calm, methodical voice of someone who did this for a living. The trail he'd found ran along the only entrance and exit to the entire valley, narrow and hemmed in by dense brush, a natural funnel that forced anything passing through into a single predictable line, close to perfect for photographing animals that never wanted to be photographed.
I think we have found a perfect place to place the trail camera. So this trail running along here is literally the only entrance and exit for this entire valley. And you can...
He talked through the small decisions out loud as he worked, weighing whether a nearby tree was too obvious a mounting spot, wondering if something further back in the tree line would stay better hidden. This footage came from the channel Erlo Brown, the same creator known for documenting unexplained encounters on his own property. Though this particular clip was filmed thousands of miles away, it was exactly the kind of ordinary working narration that made what happened next so jarring. The quiet was shattered by a single, incredibly loud, guttural roar rolling through the forest around him, powerful and close enough to stop him mid-sentence. It simply erupted out of the dense bush and rolled over the valley.
Into the tree line, so it's better hidden. This could perhaps work.
The change in him was instant. His professional composure disappeared. He went silent for a moment, then said the only honest thing he could. He had no idea what that was. It wasn't an animal he recognized, and this was a trained biologist standing in a park he knew well, someone whose entire career depended on identifying the calls around him. A wildlife professional carried a mental library of sounds most people never built. The difference between a leopard's rasping call and a baboon's alarm bark, the cough of a predator versus the snort of prey. For that roar to match nothing he'd ever catalogued in years of fieldwork wasn't a small thing. His conclusion wasn't a theory, it was a decision. He left. What do you think made a sound a trained biologist couldn't place? He set up to camp alone in the woods, expecting nothing but quiet and maybe the distant sound of sports fields somewhere nearby. Instead, he spent the entire night convinced someone, or something, was pacing right outside his camp. The man had gone out for a solo overnight trip on August 7th, 2026, using the outdoors as a way to step away from the pressure of his everyday life. He talked openly about how much he needed the break, mentioning his upcoming camping plans and a recent finger injury from his dog while setting everything up.
Right, so tonight I'm just doing a quick bivvy bag camp. Like work life, you take vacations off work, weeks off work. I'm doing that with YouTube, so this will be the last video that I upload for a week or two now. I just need a little bit of time off camera. It's just like normal working life, really. Now, you may realise through the video that I don't use this finger much. I was playing with one of my dogs, and he's got like the strongest bloody bite in the world, you know.
The weather was mild enough that he didn't need to bring much, just an air mat, a bivvy bag, and a sleeping bag. He found a spot with a tree to lean against as a backrest and settled in, later making himself dinner. For a while, the night played out exactly how he hoped it would. Quiet, uneventful, just him and his thoughts. That changed, however, when he heard something that sounded unmistakably like footsteps walking near his camp.
And rain camping is really good. Is that a badger? Hello?
He called out, "Hello!" into the dark, but got nothing back. And when he checked around him, there was no one in sight despite the sound clearly having passed right by. He tried to talk himself down, telling himself it was probably an animal, or maybe just his mind playing tricks deep into the night. For a while, that explanation seemed to work. But less than 15 minutes later, the footsteps returned, and this time it was harder to explain away. The pattern was steady and deliberate, nothing like the erratic movement you'd expect from wildlife pushing through brush.
Quite scared, people. I'm not going to pretend I'm not. I am quite scared right now. If it's a human and they come up and laugh at me, it's scaring the hell out of me, but I don't think I can sleep here. This is going to be a long night if I'm nervous like this and scared now. I need to know what this sound is. It's not like it was, it's like and then it stops.
The man behind this footage was known online as English Woodsman, a creator who regularly headed out solo into the woods to disconnect from the demands of running a YouTube channel, treating nights like this one as a mental reset more than content. He went back into the same stretch of woods that had unsettled him the night before, this time bringing a weapon just in case. What called out to him from the trees wasn't an animal, it was his own name, spoken back in his own voice. Angelo started his second day camping alone in a remote part of the Canadian wilderness, noting early on that the heat had already turned his tent into an oven by mid-morning. He spent the first stretch of the day on routine tasks, editing footage, repairing a broken fishing rod, and keeping the mosquitoes off with smoke from a small fire.
Welcome to day 2 of this new adventure we're on. So, I definitely slept pretty good last night. I should just set up a tarp, but honestly I'm just not ready to do that kind of work yet, but we'll see how bad it gets. There's a lot of dragonflies in this area. It's actually incredible because I'll be like looking around.
Using a power station he'd brought along, he was able to run his laptop and even make himself espresso in the middle of the woods, something he clearly took pride in. After moving his setup into the shade of his truck, he put together a proper brunch.
Other than that, we're pretty much done. Ready to bon appetit. I gotta go get some water after by the lake so I can clean everything. And yeah. Finally time for some lunch.
As the light started fading, Angelo felt an unexplainable pull to head back to the exact spot in the woods where something had unsettled him the night before. This time, he decided to bring a weapon, telling the camera flat out that it felt like the the pits of hell were waiting for him in those trees.
We know there's something down there based on what happened last night, the last few times. There's 100% something in those woods. And I think I might go down there one last time and maybe ask a few questions and see if I can interact and actually get some answers as to what the heck is going on down there.
Angelo, who ran the channel Exploring with Angelo, documented the return trip in detail, and it was this second walk into the woods where the night took a turn. Almost as soon as he stepped past the tree line, the temperature dropped suddenly, and he described a wave of anger coming over him that he was certain wasn't his own. Somewhere in the distance, sounds resembling human voices started drifting through the trees.
That sounded like a person. In that direction.
Then, it happened. Angelo heard his own name called out from somewhere in the woods. At first, he couldn't quite place it, but as it repeated, he realized the voice calling out was mimicking his own.
Angelo.
Again, I just heard my name that way. What?
The feeling of being followed set in almost immediately after. He started hearing tapping sounds against nearby trees, convinced now that whatever was out there was tracking him as he moved. Rattled and no longer willing to push further into the dark, he turned back and retreated to his campsite in a full panic.
Alright, I think it's time to go. I'm just gonna get the hell out of here. Alright. Let's get the out of Dodge. I've had enough right now of this place.
Even back at camp, it didn't let up. He continued hearing his name called out from somewhere beyond the firelight and kept the flames going, unsure whether they would actually do anything to keep whatever this was at a distance. Hoping to get some kind of clearer answer, he pulled out a spirit box app, and the device spat back fragmented words like dead along with the number 5, repeating over and over with no clear explanation.
I don't know what the hell that just said.
Dead. Who's dead? It almost sounded like it said my name.
Through the rest of the night, he heard movement circling near his truck, followed by something making contact with the vehicle itself. Too drained and too afraid to relocate in complete darkness, he spent his final hours huddled by the fire, fighting off both the mosquitoes and his own nerves before finally forcing himself to bed. If something out there had called out your name in your own voice, would you have gone looking for what said it, or stayed by the fire like he did? They flew into one of the most remote stretches of coastline in Canada, a location so infamous for aggressive Sasquatch encounters that local pilots warned people against spending the night there. What they heard after dark was enough to keep them frozen inside their tent until morning. Mike Wanders and guide Eric DeCero set out for an undisclosed remote cabin in Clayoquot Sound on Vancouver Island, a site with a long history of Sasquatch activity. Mike's decision to make the trip was inspired by an account from 2014 when a man named Sander Jain had been forced to call for emergency rescue after hearing heavy, unexplained footfalls and violent rock-slamming sounds shaking the cabin around him.
According to Jane's account, the ordeal began with the sound of large rocks or boulders being slammed together in the distance. As the night wore on, the sounds grew in intensity. What had started as distant impacts became explosive crashes much closer.
This footage came from the YouTube channel Mike Wanders, where the creator documented remote wilderness expeditions like this one. Before heading out, Mike learned that local floatplane companies and researchers actively warned against overnight stays in this exact area, citing repeated reports of aggressive, unidentified beings in the region.
I was given a warning. No matter what happens, the floatplane will not be able to rescue you until first light.
After being dropped off by float plane and shuttled the rest of the way by local fishermen, the two men immediately noticed something off about the area. Despite being in the middle of salmon run season, there was a complete absence of wildlife, particularly bears, animals that should have been all over this stretch of coastline at that time of year.
They're going to take us out to the cabin, we hope, on this dinghy before they head out for the night.
Put yourself in the situation where
it's crazy to be here.
Yeah, you can see
it's crazy to be here. We're not going in. We're not allowed to go in. But Eric somehow found this spot, and here we are.
That night, sitting in the dark, the pair captured what became the core of their evidence. Loud, heavy crashes echoed down from a steep mountain slope across from their position. Sounds too large and too deliberate to write off as falling debris.
We're hearing stuff right across the water. Oh! Oh my God.
Then came what they later referred to as the power knock, a deliberate, powerful wood-on-wood strike that didn't match the behavior of any known animal in the region. Looking back at the shape of the land around them, a bowl-like valley surrounded by steep slopes, they figured it would have been perfect for something to either ambush from above or use to make its presence known and sound bigger than it actually was. Despite the mounting tension and the sounds continuing through the night, Mike and Eric stayed put inside their tent, choosing not to investigate further in the dark. They made it through until morning completely unharmed.
Loud crash in the completely silent, still woods, no wind at that point. Just a big disturbance up on the slope right across from us, and then like silence for a second, and then like smack. Only thing that I could think would be like if a rock dislodged and hit a bunch of trees on the way down.
Looking back on the trip afterward, Mike admitted the evidence was subjective on its own, but said the combination of local testimonials, the total absence of natural predators, and the unexplained audio events all pointed towards something real out there, something that continued to defy any conventional explanation. If you had heard something powerful enough to knock on wood like that, echoing across a mountain slope at night, would you have stayed in your tent or packed up and left at first light? A trucker pulling into a rural site before sunrise never expected his headlights to land on something standing perfectly still by the tree line, watching him arrive. It happened in the early morning hours of May 30th, 2024, at an industrial site in Alberta, Canada. He was there for a routine pickup, nothing out of the ordinary, the kind of job he'd probably done dozens of times before. As his headlights swept across the edge of the property on approach, they caught something that didn't belong there. A massive, upright figure standing motionless near the trees, not moving, not reacting, just there.
We would like to go over some videos, photos, and reports of Bigfoot by remote oil workers, fishermen, and outdoorsmen in Alberta and British Columbia, Canada.
Dashcam footage recovered afterward confirmed the sighting wasn't a trick of the headlights or a shadow playing games. The camera caught a brief but clear image of the figure as the truck rolled onto the site, and once researchers got a look at the footage, they estimated its height at nearly 10 feet tall based on its size relative to the surrounding trees and structures. This clip came from Backcountry Discoveries, where the footage was later broken down and analyzed frame by frame to rule out anything explainable. The trucker himself didn't even clock it right away. He'd already parked, stepped out of his rig, and started walking toward the equipment he'd come to load when he caught sight of it standing there by the tree line. He froze on the spot for a second, taking it in before the reality of what he was looking at hit him. Then he turned, ran back to his truck, and drove off the site without stopping to look back even once.
He quickly ran back to his truck and drove off site. The dash camera recorded the creature as the truck drove onto site. Height estimates put this creature over 10 feet tall.
He never went back to finish that pickup that morning. What do you think that trucker actually saw standing there in the dark? Most people were afraid of the dark itself. This YouTuber found out the hard way that it wasn't the darkness you should have been scared of, but what might have been waiting inside it. Armed with nothing but a camera and a flashlight, she pushed deep into the forest at night, alone. The air was cold and completely still, the only sounds around her being the crunch of dead leaves under her boots and the faint hum of insects somewhere off in the distance.
Hope it doesn't mess up the night either. I just thought I saw eyes. Hold on. Is that eyes? Hold on. I saw one right in here. I keep... Oh. Is it blinking? It's like this one.
It was the kind of atmosphere that would have sent most people straight back to their car, but she kept moving, forcing herself past the creeping unease tugging at her nerves with every step deeper in. For a while, everything seemed fine. Then, that feeling came back, and this time, it didn't fade. With every step forward, it grew stronger, like something unseen was tracking her movements through the trees, matching her pace without ever showing itself.
Everybody's trying to get their last camping weekend in. It's supposed to be cold and stuff here for a while, I think. Or that might be in a couple of weeks. I don't know. I don't keep up with the weather very much. I'm just trying to talk over this music. Guys, we're ready to break something. We run up.
This footage was uploaded to Dee's Dark Adventures, a channel built entirely around solo night investigations like this one, deep in remote forest with minimal gear and zero backup. Eventually, she stopped to check her surroundings, unable to shake the sense that she'd been followed the entire walk in. That's when a faint hissing reached her ears, close enough to hear clearly but impossible to place. She couldn't tell if it came from something in the underbrush or from somewhere else entirely.
The sucky part is that's my way out. Come on. I can't catch the ball. It's going off. Woo! Why is it changing it to yellow? Hello, I see you playing with that ball. Hello, I see you playing with that ball.
Then, without warning, something started throwing objects at her out of the darkness. Small, sharp thuds landed on the ground and against trees nearby, close enough that there was no mistaking them for falling branches. Panic set in fast as she realized whatever was out there wasn't just watching anymore. It was closing the distance, each movement sounding more deliberate, more predatory than the last. The air around her felt heavier, charged with a kind of dread she hadn't felt during the entire walk. Every instinct in her body was screaming for her to run.
Guys. It's okay, I'll be back. I'm not gonna...
What do you think was closing in on her that night? The camera lens captures a flicker of movement near the dense tree line of the remote Uinta mountain range, where a massive, bearded figure with Viking-like facial features suddenly appears, then disappears almost as quickly as it registers on screen. The figure seems to blend into the shadows of the forest, standing motionless with a weight and presence that makes it difficult to judge exactly what is being seen. As the footage is scrutinized frame by frame, the silhouette suggests a stature and build rarely seen in the deep wilderness, raising questions about what exactly was watching from the periphery of a region long associated with Sasquatch reports. Deep within the same rugged terrain, another discovery stops the expedition in its tracks. A complex, deliberate structure, seemingly woven from heavy logs and branches, stands deep in the woods, appearing far too organized to be explained by a simple windfall or natural collapse. While the initial instinct is to attribute such construction to human activity, the sheer scale and the location, far removed from any trail or campsite, leave the investigators wondering who or what could have built it. Upon closer inspection, the grim reality of the site becomes clear. The carcass of a deer lies at the base of the structure, its ribs gnawed and broken in a way the investigators found difficult to explain, adding another unsettling detail to the scene. Silence envelops the remote lake as the researchers attempt to process the scene, but the stillness is interrupted by voices drifting through the trees, indistinct and impossible to place. Despite being miles from any known human settlement or other camping groups, the faint, indistinct sounds echo against the water, leaving the team scanning a shoreline they believed should be empty. Shortly after, the expedition discovers a series of tracks pressed deep into the muddy floodplain. These are not common animal prints. They are enormous, measuring roughly 13 to 14 inches long, with clear evidence of a mid-tarsal ridge, a feature that Bigfoot researchers often point to when identifying unusual bipedal tracks. The investigation into Meek's Cabin Reservoir brings to light a harrowing up-close encounter from years prior. A witness, while fishing at the south end of the lake, came face-to-face with a massive, dark brown, furry humanoid creature. This being, estimated to be 8 to 9 feet tall, was observed leaping over a solid wood rail fence with effortless agility while clutching a bundle of broken branches against its torso, a display of strength and coordination that stayed with the witness long after the encounter. The witness described a moment of intense eye contact, noting that the creature looked at them with a sense of wariness before vanishing into the dense undergrowth, gone within seconds despite its size. As the team from Rocky Mountain Sasquatch reviews these findings, the pattern of evidence, from the massive tracks to the mysterious bone-strewn structures, begins to suggest a persistent and elusive presence in the Uinta Mountains. These reports, often kept quiet by those who fear ridicule, highlight a recurring phenomenon that continues to challenge our understanding of what inhabits these high-altitude wilderness regions. Whether these encounters represent a single species or something else entirely, the evidence collected in this hot zone continues to draw researchers back to the same unforgiving slopes. So what do you think explains the giant bearded figure captured on camera and the gnawed remains found beneath those strange forest structures? If you loved videos like this, do well to leave a like and comment on which story made you think deeper about Bigfoot. And don't forget to subscribe.